As other brands leave the pickup segment, Volkswagen reasserts its commitment to the sector with this second-generation Amarok. Developed alongside the fourth-generation Ford Ranger, this South African-built light truck aims to deliver the car-like quality feel customers will want, but with even greater practicality and off-road capability.
Want a posh pickup? Then this, on paper at least, is your best option. Volkswagen's second generation Amarok. The original version, launched in 2010, went on to sell 830,000 worldwide with a midterm update in 2016 and is still in production in Argentina. This new one's rather different. Built for Volkswagen by Ford in Pretoria, South Africa, and designed in concert with arguably its closest rival, the Ford Ranger. Wolfsburg wants us to know that it's still very Volkswagen though, with an image slightly upmarket of the Ford, an arguably more car-like cabin, and a lot of the drive assist tech features we've recently become used to seeing on Volkswagen cars. It should appeal to a wider market as well. Previously, people rarely considered an Amarok as an alternative to something like a Toyota Hilux. Now they might, because in this form, it can tow more, carry more, go deeper through water, and go further off-road. Sounds promising. But this pickup will need to be good because it competes in a declining market segment from which there's been a mass exodus of brands in the last few years. Hence, Volkswagen's reticence about committing to the investment that would have been required to design and engineer this second-generation model completely from scratch. Potential customers, though, won't be impressed if all we've actually got here is a rebadged Ranger. So can this Mark II model really be something more? Well, you'll need the industry's most comprehensive review, the Car and Driving Road Test, to find out. You can see why people like pickups. You sit commandingly, feel safe, and there's a sense of practical authenticity you don't get from any sort of lifestyle SUV. Whether the concept of a premium price pickup really works though, or is simply contradictory to the kind of vehicle this should be, is another question. Mercedes couldn't make it add up with their X-Class, and the predecessor model to this second generation Amarok, though modestly successful, never sold in numbers large enough to really justify a replacement. We've got one courtesy of a joint venture Volkswagen's entered into with Ford, a project very much led by the Blue Oval brand, which you might think would make it even more difficult for this Amarok, second time round, to deliver the premium vibe it's striving for. Let's see. One of the things that's always made the Amarok seem a little more upmarket is the fact that many people have usually ordered it with a V6 diesel beneath the bonnet. That's a trend Wolfsburg thinks will continue with this Mark II model, which is why we've chosen to test it in that form here. Don't imagine that this power plant is geared toward trail-blazing performance. As before, it's more about easy, wafty torque. And if you don't particularly need that, or the higher fuel consumption that comes with it, you'll be directed to the alternative 2-litre, 4-cylinder TDI diesel unit. Both engines are borrowed from Ford and sit on a Ford T6 platform mated to a Ford-engineered 10-speed auto gearbox. But despite all of that, Volkswagen still wants us to believe that the Amarok has drive dynamics unique to its brand, which is why, as part of the mainly Australian-based development of this design, engineers from Wolfsburg were seconded to Ford with instructions to instill an extra touch of comfort into elements like the steering and suspension. Sure enough, if you happen to be trying this Amarok shortly after a Ranger test drive, you might quite possibly notice the kind of light, accurate steering that might feature on, say, a big Volkswagen Touareg SUV. And the suspension is certainly a touch more supple than the pickup norm. Unfortunately, that's not saying a great deal. It's disappointing to have reached this century's third decade and find that pickups have hardly changed at all in the way that they're suspended, with conventional springs and dampers up front and old-fashioned leaf springs at the rear. As long ago as 2016, the most recent version of the Nissan Navara showed that properly capable load bearing could be matched with something a bit more sophisticated. But its more advanced 5-link rear suspension setup has been ignored by subsequent rivals. If all you ever do is tool around on well-surfaced highways, you won't really notice the leaf-sprung arrangement's deficiencies. But as with all pickups, they'll become much more evident on twisting or choppier roads. At speed through the turns on these kind of routes, you won't be able to drive this Amarok like you would a big SUV, but it's certainly not as crude in terms of bump absorption and body roll as a rival Japanese pickup, say a Toyota Hilux or an Isuzu D-Max would be. We've got Volkswagen engineering to thank for that, but it doesn't seem to have produced an end result that's any more car-like than the predecessor model. A previous owner might even think it's not quite as good. If you happen to have used an Amarok before, see what you think. Nor has the switch from hydraulic to electric steering brought huge drivability benefits, though it has enabled the brand to fit a raft of drive assist features that weren't available before. We mentioned engines earlier, a few more details on those. It's going to be some time yet before the pickup segment weans itself off the black pump, so they're all diesel powered, with the 4-cylinder 2-litre unit offered in two forms, either with 170 PS mated uniquely in the lineup to manual transmission, a variant likely to be super rare, or more usually with 205 PS and mated to the 10-speed auto transmission we referenced earlier, which gets to 62 miles an hour, just over a second quicker at 10.5 seconds, en route to the 112 mile an hour top speed figure that all Amaroks share. Here, as I mentioned earlier, we're trying the V6 diesel, a 3-litre unit with 240 PS that gets to 62 miles an hour in 9 seconds dead and puts out a prodigious 600 newton meters of torque, enough to make light work of towing duties that see it able to tug along 3.5 tonnes up from 3.1 tonnes before. Presumably, Volkswagen could also in future offer the 292 PS twin-turbo 3-litre EcoBoost V6 petrol engine used by the top Raptor version of its Ford Ranger cousin, but of that, there is no sign. Refinement fits with this Volkswagen's slightly more upmarket pretensions, by pickup standards anyway. If you've selected this V6, the distant, refined rumble under acceleration is far more pleasant than the 4-cylinder strain you'd get from an equivalently priced plush Hilux or D-Max. The huge mirrors obviously take their toll on cruising wind noise, but you'll be grateful for the way they help make this huge vehicle easy to place in an urban environment, though you might still find it a handful to park on a crowded village street. If you're coming from the old model, having an extra couple of ratios in the auto gearbox might be a bit of a novelty, but all this seems to have done is to confuse the transmission as to what gear it should offer you when instant acceleration is called for, hence the slight delay when you plant the accelerator in search of a quick overtake. There are no steering wheel paddle shifters to quicken the process, just a fiddly M-designated rocker switch for manual ratio changes positioned to the side of the unusually shaped gear selector. A display at the bottom of the left-hand side of the instrument screen tells you which of the 10 gears you're in. Gear shifting is one of the parameters affected by the various drive modes this Volkswagen wants to offer you, only two of which, normal and eco, are designed for use on tarmac. The remainder are for heavier duty use, mud or ruts, deep snow or sand, slippery and load/trailer. The 4Motion permanent 4-wheel drive system is equipped with 3 of its own modes. You'll usually use either 4A or 4H, but there's also a re-engineered low ratio 4L setting for really gnarly terrain. Plus this hill descent control, and this pricier Pan-Americana version also comes with a rear locking differential for the driveline. Volkswagen insists that this second generation Amarok is a more capable thing than its predecessor off-piste, courtesy of shorter overhangs and an increase in ground clearance to 237mm, which has facilitated a vast improvement in wading depth from 500 to 800mm. The off-road stats bear this out with an approach angle of 30 degrees, a departure angle of 23 and a ramp angle of 21 degrees. These Wrangler tyres offer a good compromise between tarmac traction and off-road prowess, and there's a dedicated selectable off-road section for the centre of the instrument screen, which can show off-road status, pitch and roll, and the 4Motion system's power distribution. You can also select a towing status screen should you want to take advantage of this second generation model's improved 3,500 kilogram towing capacity. This is a more advanced kind of Amarok, but it's recognisably a member of that model line, albeit one enhanced with a further evolution of Volkswagen commercial vehicle design language. The visual vibe is a more capable one too, thanks to shorter overhangs and an increase in ground clearance to 237mm. At first glance, you wouldn't immediately pigeonhole this Amarok as the repackaged Ford Ranger it essentially is, though in actual fact the styling tinsel disguises the fact that the windscreen, the side and rear windows, the roof and even the door handles and mirror housings are shared with this pickup's Ford development cousin. Look closely and you can even find FOMOCO script on the windscreen. But at the same time, the Wolfsburg maker has also been allowed to introduce a few of its own aesthetic touches, most notably these squared off wheel arches carried forward from the previous generation model and complete with plastic cladding for off-road protection. These house alloys unique to Volkswagen that start at 17 inches and theoretically go right up to 21 inches in size, though most models feature the 18-inch rims we have here. You don't get the variety of body shapes you would with a Ranger. Like its predecessor, for our market at least, this Amarok only comes as a double cab, which is a bigger thing than before, the 5,350mm body length being 96mm longer than the old model, which makes it now 20mm longer than a competing Toyota Hilux. Compared to the old Amarok, it's also 10mm taller, but 34mm narrower. Roof rails draw attention to a strengthened upper panel, which can now take loads of up to 350 kilograms. So you could strap a tent up there. If you haven't got one designed to be fastened to the top of a pickup, then Volkswagen will sell you one. There's certainly a more modern vibe with this Mark II model's higher set front end, which features a slimline front grille, and in the case of a top version like this, a black X-shaped front bumper graphic and Amarok script featuring above the number plate. Further up, these narrow angular LED headlights can feature the intelligent matrix or IQ light tech we have here. This lower skid plate panel below the number plate is black with this Panamericana trim level, but silver elsewhere in the range. Avoid base trim and the grille gets this lower chrome strip too. The rear gets C-shaped LED lights and the Amarok name embossed across the tailgate, which by the way is now integrated into the central locking system. These somewhat tacky 4Motion stickers on the rear flanks, we'd suggest, probably ought to be peeled off prior to delivery before they start looking dog-eared after repeated cleanings. But under the skin, the tough body on-frame architecture remains as solidly traditional as before. Right, pulling out this rebranded Ford key, which can be used to operate the optional electrically activated roll cover, let's take a look at just how Volkswagen-like this Amarok is behind the wheel. Well, Volkswagen's tried to differentiate things a bit, using its own screen menus and fonts on the two main screens, and adding its own design three-spoke steering wheel. But if you happen to have also test-driven a Ranger, You'll soon be noticing that the buttons on that wheel and the essential screen hardware and architecture is all Ford derived, as are the column stalks, the window switches, and the essential design dimensions of things like the gear lever and the door handles. None of this is a problem. We thought the cabin of the current Ranger was a decent step forward when we tested it, and this huge portrait centre screen is considerably superior in size and functionality to the severely flawed MIB3 setup from the Golf that this pickup might have inherited had its maker designed it from scratch. Somehow too, it's been incorporated into a front of cabin design that still manages to have a very Volkswagen feel, helped by the Wolfsburg maker's own optimally configured buttons and rotary switches that turn out to be satisfyingly practical and intuitive to use. The controls have been designed in such a way that a number of key functions, such as the all-wheel drive system settings and the infotainment volume, are controlled by physical switches, which means they can be used when wearing gloves, for example. If you've got those on though, you might not want to bother with this fiddly rocker switch by the side of the gear selector for manual ratio changes. Steering wheel paddle shifters would have been better. Gloved up folk will also dislike Volkswagen's decision to switch away from the physical buttons you'd use in a Ranger to alter ventilation. Yes, there is a lower physical button to access climate settings, but all it does is to bring up ventilation options on the touchscreen above, after which you have to mess about with small icons and slider bars, a distracting thing to do while you're driving. As you would expect from a design from this decade, the instrument binnacle gets a digital screen, Volkswagen's digital cockpit, which is 8 inches in size with base life trim, but as here, 12.3 inches with all the other models. What you view in the centre of the instrument cluster can, as usual, be tailored via steering wheel buttons, and in this case there's some really pickup orientated options, off-road and towing status, as well as the usual ones, audio, trip computer, drive assistant, vehicle settings, nav and phone. We mentioned the portrait central infotainment screen, which is 10.1 inches in size with base life trim, but as here, 12 inches with all the other models, so that it can incorporate VW Connect navigation. Map data, along with other infotainment function updates, can be done over the air, thanks to the standard fitment of an online control unit, complete with integrated eSIM. All the things you'd expect of this monitor are possible, including online voice control, and the main menu options are vehicle, radio, phone, navigation, media and access buttons for wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. Unlike most fancier Volkswagen model centre screens, this one has a proper volume knob, inserted like an afterthought in the row of chunky switches we just mentioned below the display. Enough on screens. What about the quality you might hope for from a pickup positioning itself at the premium end of the segment? Well, further up the range, there's a bit of that. Things like leather effect dashboard upholstery, an unusually designed stitched gear selector, neat little speakers in the A-pillars, and metal-dipped air vent surrounds. Enough, anyway, to ensure that if you want a wipe-clean cabin vibe, this won't be your preferred choice in this class, though on base spec models there's plenty of the hard scratchy plastic you'll probably want if this is going to be a working vehicle. As you'd expect from a properly capable pickup, you're seated commandingly on chairs Volkswagen decided to design itself. Most models get this 10-way power adjustable driver seat, and the 2 top trim levels are upholstered with this cricket leather. The view out's aided by tall side windows and manoeuvring by the standard fitment of both rear parking sensors and a reversing camera. Storage facilities include a lockable glove box with a further lidded glove box compartment above it, though it's not particularly big. There are the usual couple of cup holders in the centre console, but they're not particularly deep and are set quite far back. You also get a small section at the bottom of the centre panel for storing your phone, which is why this area also has a USB-C port and, unusually for a Volkswagen, a USB-A port too. Plus, there's a wireless phone charging mat on most models. There's also a tray on top of the dashboard and a decently sized lidded bin between the seats, though without the connectivity ports inside that would allow you to charge your devices away from prying eyes. Volkswagen hasn't forgotten an overhead sunglasses compartment though, and you get ticket clips in the sun visors. There's a grab handle on each A-pillar, and the doors, which on this top model have unusual contrast-coloured stitched armrests, have narrow pockets incorporating bottle holders. Right, let's take a look in the rear seat. Now, there's been a 173mm increase in wheelbase length for the Amarok this time round. It now measures 3,270mm between the wheels, 185mm longer than a Hilux. And Volkswagen claims that most of that extra length has been used for the benefit of rear-seated folk. So let's see. The side steps, fitted to most models, aid entry, but do decorate your legs with mud every time you climb in, if you're not careful. And once you're inside, well, you wouldn't exactly call it roomy back here, but there's definitely more space on offer than there was before. And it would certainly be more comfortably possible to transport a third middle-seated adult, should you need to, though this raised section of the centre floor won't help that, and shoulder room would still be a little tight. When there are only two of you, you'll be able to use this central armrest with its incorporated cup holders. Most models get this centrally positioned 230-volt outlet too, plus there's a separate 12-volt socket, centre vents and seat back pockets. Grab handles on the B-pillars and above the door apertures give passengers something to hang on to if the going gets rough. As usual in a pickup, the seat base flips up to reveal a couple of storage spaces, one of them filled with tools and a wheel brace. And the seat back also folds down, but is too heavily tilted when you do to be of much use for transporting things. Despite a radically changing market, the pickup segment hasn't changed very much. Almost everyone still wants four-wheel drive, diesel power and auto transmission, so that's what this second-generation Amarok continues to focus on. As before, it only comes in this double cab body style. If you want a single cab or super cab body shape, you'll need competing Ford Ranger or Toyota Hilux models. Bear in mind, you'll need to buy this pickup from a Volkswagen commercial vehicles dealer rather than one of the brand's car showrooms. And as we filmed in autumn 2023, VAT excluded pricing started at around £34,000 on the road, but that only gets you the entry-level Life spec 170 PS 2-litre TDI diesel manual model that few will want. Most will want that same 2-litre TDI 4-cylinder diesel in its uprated 205 PS state of tune, where it's mated to a 10-speed auto transmission and, as we filmed, was priced from around £35,000 on the road in base Life trim. You'll need over £7,000 more to stretch to mid-spec style trim, but at that level, you'll be offered the option of finding around £2,500 more to stretch to the kind of V6 powertrain Amarok customers have historically preferred. In this case, a 3-litre TDI unit mated to the same 10-speed auto and putting out 240 PS. You have to have this V6 if you opt for either of the two most desirable variants. One of those is the Pan Americana, which is what we have here. It's a plush variant aimed at those who want to mix on and off-road use. Costs from just over £47,000, excluding VAT on the road, as we filmed. Has a name that sounds like a tropical drink, and is probably the sweet spot in the range if you can afford to spend a bit more on your Amarok. We can't really imagine why you'd choose the other top version, the flagship on-road orientated Aventura derivative. That model can't reach the 1,000 kilogram payload figure required for classification as a commercial vehicle, which means you won't be able to reclaim the VAT on its asking price, which in turn meant a VAT included asking figure, as we filmed, of getting on for £58,000, all merely to get a larger set of 21-inch wheels and a smattering of extra equipment. Why would you? Answers on a postcard, if you please. You might be wondering about the premium required to get this Amarok over an equivalent version of its close development cousin, the Ford Ranger. The answer is around £1,500, though that doesn't take account of equipment differences between the two models. The wild track version of that Ford that many owner-drivers choose is a more striking thing than its Amarok style spec equivalent, but you could expect the Volkswagen to have a slightly more cultured feel and marginally higher residuals, so it really depends on your priorities. Would you also want to compare against the other most obvious segment rival, Toyota's Hilux? With that Toyota, pricing's very comparable to this Volkswagen, but again, you'd probably get a bit less kit for your money with a comparable Amarok. Mid-range style trim here compares to more aggressive, invincible trim with a Hilux. If you're looking at an Amarok, you're probably already resigned to the fact that you'll be paying quite a lot more than would be required for the other contenders in this segment, the Isuzu D-Max and the SsangYong Musso. It might also be worth pointing out that the near £50,000 budget required for the two top-spec Amarok variants would nearly be enough to get you the sector's first full EV pickup, the Maxus T90 EV. But that's considerably compromised in terms of driving range and towing ability compared to this diesel model. If, having considered all of this, you conclude that it is an Amarok that you really want, then you're going to need to know just how generous Volkswagen's been with standard specs. So let's take a look at that. All versions get LED headlamps, rear parking sensors, dark tinted rear side windows, adaptive cruise control, power folding exterior mirrors, an alarm, lockable wheel bolts and towing protection. Interior features fitted across the range include air conditioning and a rear view reversing camera system. And there's also a decent standard of across-the-board media connectivity, including Volkswagen's App Connect system that gives you wireless Apple CarPlay and Android Auto smartphone mirroring. And you get a pretty complete suite of camera safety features, which we'll brief you on in a few moments. On to the items that differentiate the various trim levels. Well, the entry-level trim, Life, features 17-inch Coimbra silver alloy wheels and has 8-way manually adjustable fabric-trimmed front seats, offers an 8-inch digital central infotainment screen and gives you a 10.1-inch digital instrument display. The next level up, Style, is recognisable by its larger 18-inch Amadora silver alloy wheels, its chrome styling bar, its chrome-embellished front grille and its black side steps, which have a chrome insert. At Style level, you get an Area View 360 camera system and front parking sensors, along with the brand's IQ Light LED matrix headlights, which feature individually activated LEDs that can be illuminated to alter the brightness and direction of the light cone. The system includes dynamic light assist, advanced main beam control and dynamic headlight range control functions. Interior style spec features include a plusher cabin with art velours, micro fleece upholstery, dual zone climate control, a 10-way power adjustable driver seat, a rear passenger 120 or 230 volt socket and a larger 12-inch digital cockpit instrument screen. The central infotainment screen grows to 12 inches too, so that it can better incorporate an added navigation system. That brings us to the Amarok we have here, the Panamericana version, designed, as we said, to be plush in the slush. Hence the addition of a rear locking differential to the driveline. Plus there's an underride guard and a comfort suspension setup for tarmac territory. Upgraded 18-inch black Amadora alloy wheels mark out Panamericana trim. Plus there's a premium bumper with a black X insert, a matte black styling bar, black side steps, silver roof rails and contrast-coloured mirrors and door handles. Inside with Panamericana trim you get cricket leather upholstery along with a Harman Kardon 8-speaker audio system, plus 10-way power adjustment is added to the front passenger seat. Now, we mentioned earlier our reticence for recommending the range-topping Aventura model, but if you simply must have it, then you'll get much larger 21-inch Warburg silver alloy wheels, chrome-plated exterior mirror and door handles, a premium bumper with silver X insert, Savona leather upholstery, and a heated steering wheel. There is, of course, a wide range of very desirable options. You can upgrade the trim of base Life spec with an optional technology pack and do the same with style spec by adding an optional premium pack. Avoid base spec and you'll be offered a specific optional towing pack tailored to the variant you've chosen. And bear in mind, you will almost certainly be paying your Volkswagen dealer more for your choice of paint colour, because the only standard shade is solid, clear white. Otherwise, the options list is mainly centred around practical items, things like underbody protection features, trailer mounts and eye-rings for towing, and even a snorkel attached to the A-pillar. A diverse range of styling bars is available, including a factory-fit bull bar, and many potential customers will want to look at the electrically operated roll cover, which can be operated either from the cargo area or via a remote using the key fob. A manually operated version of it's available as well. And of course, you'll be able to specify a hard top for the load bay too. There's also a newly developed bike holder, a tent designed to strap onto the roof, and what the brand calls a multifunction carrier system. On to safety stuff. Now, Volkswagen talks about including more than 20 new assistance systems on this second generation Amarok, but inevitably most of them are limited to high-spec models or optional equipment specifications. What you do now get across the range is the company's autonomous emergency braking front assist system, which uses a front camera for driver assist systems and a front radar to detect imminent front collisions. In the event of danger, the integrated brake assist system can prepare the brakes for rapid braking so that maximum braking force is generated even with minimal pedal pressure. If the driver doesn't react in the event of an imminent collision, the front assist setup will automatically brake the vehicle and bring it to a standstill if necessary. Front assist is active from 3 to 70 miles an hour and up to a maximum speed in conjunction with another standard feature, adaptive cruise control. And pedestrians are detected at a speed of up to 50 miles an hour. Additional safety is provided by a swerve support setup that intervenes should you suddenly come across stationary vehicles, pedestrians or cyclists, the system aiding any swerving manoeuvre that's been initiated by corrective steering intervention. And there's a dynamic road sign display system that pictures posted speed limits as you pass, displaying them on the instrument screen. Avoid base trim and you'll also get some extra features which you can add to a life-trimmed Amarok if you spend extra on the optional technology pack we mentioned earlier. Firstly, there's an intelligent speed assist setup that automatically adjusts vehicle speed to a detected speed limit. From style spec upwards, you also get a lane keeping system with lane assist to keep you in lane, and side assist, basically a blind spot information system that alerts you if you're dangerously pulling out in front of another vehicle. Side assist uses radar sensors on the sides of the vehicle that detect an area extending from the exterior mirrors to approximately 4 metres behind the bumper. Above a vehicle speed of around 29 miles an hour, the detection area within which a warning is emitted when vehicles are approaching quickly is up to around 18 metres. The warning is visually indicated by a constant light in the respective exterior mirror. From style spec upwards in the range, you also get rear traffic alert, which warns you of oncoming traffic when you're reversing out of a space, plus reverse brake assist, which automatically applies braking if you're about to hit something at parking speeds. Rear occupant alert, which advises you if you're about to leave or lock the vehicle when there's someone still in the rear. And wrong way alert, which makes a huge fuss if you're about to drive down a one-way street. Passive safety features fitted across the range include an automatic post-collision braking system. If you should ever hit something, this will instantly apply the brakes to reduce the possibility of the vehicle spinning on to hit something else. And there's the usual e-call system that will advise the emergency services with your exact GPS location should you be in a collision where the airbags are triggered. As you would expect, tyre pressure monitoring, a speed limiter, ISOFIX fastenings for the rear bench, and the usual assistance for braking, stability and traction control also comes included. Let's take a look at the cargo area. Now, as with all modern pickups, the bulky rear bumper, which incorporates a step, stops the tailgate from lowering completely. The folded tailgate, with its Fomoco branded hinges, folds with these red wire stays, and when it's flat, reveals a handy moulded ruler. Annoyingly, this cargo area isn't lined as standard, but it features lighting on both sides, something we've never seen on a pickup. More importantly, it can swallow a Euro pallet loaded sideways and has 6 redesigned eye-rings capable of handling up to 400 kilograms of load. One of the clever features of the original Amarok was the way that the rear shock absorbers were mounted outboard of the chassis rails to free up space, and that's been carried forward here, which is needed because despite this Mark II model's increase in overall length, the cargo bay at 1,544mm wide is 11mm narrower than before, measuring 1,222mm between the wheel arches, which is 60mm narrower than before. It is slightly deeper though, with a load height of 529mm up from 508, and there's 1,624mm of cargo area length. Payload has increased fractionally for this second generation model. Get an automatic Life, Style or Pan Americana model and it'll be rated at between 1,006 and 1,068 kilograms. A manual Life variant can lug up to 1,103 kilograms. As we told you in our market section, the top spec Adventurer version falls way below the 1-ton payload limit for commercial vehicle classification. It's rated at just 877 kilograms, which means you won't be able to claim back VAT on the purchase price. Across the range, the roof rack can now take loads of up to 350 kilograms stationary, which is 150 kilograms more than before. It's 85 kilograms when moving. Wading depth is up from 500 to 800 millimeters and greater than that still if you add the optional exhaust snorkel. And towing capability has risen to a maximum of 3,500 kilos. The permissible total weight of a vehicle and trailer has increased from 6 to 6.5 tonnes. What about running costs? Well, surprisingly, in the engine range, there are no moves towards electrification, but you can expect that to change throughout the production run. There's not much evidence of a shift away from diesel fuel either. The black pump fueled engines come with a larger 19.3 litre AdBlue tank, up from 13 litres, the reservoir for which is next to the diesel filler point under a flap on the offside of the vehicle. Talking of that, across the range there's an 80 litre fuel tank. Service intervals are set at every 2 years or every 125,000 miles, whichever comes first, and you can select readouts for oil life and the diesel unit's AdBlue level in the centre of the instrument screen. What about the fuel and emissions stats? Well, the 205 PS version of the 4-cylinder 2-litre TDI unit that many will choose manages combined cycle fuel economy of up to 32.8 mpg and a best of 227 grams per kilometre of CO2. It's up to 33.6 mpg and 221 grams per kilometre for the rare 2-litre TDI 170 PS manual gearbox version. You're probably going to want your Amarok with the 3-litre TDI V6 we've been trying here, in which case the fuel figure is 28 miles per gallon with 264 grams per kilometre of emissions, or 265 grams per kilometre for the two top variants. We've struggled to get much more than 25 mpg during our test. All the figures quoted do of course require selection of the most frugal eco drive mode, and all of course suffer because of this pickup's prodigious curb weight between 2,192 and 2,423 kilograms, depending on chosen variant. To help you get somewhere close to the quoted stats, there's a selectable eco behaviour screen in the centre of the instrument display, which rates your driving for the frugality of acceleration, deceleration and speed. Insurance for this V6 Panamericana model is rated at Group 44E. It'd be Group 42E if you went for the more affordable 4-cylinder 2-litre TDI 205 PS style spec model. For that 4-cylinder variant, independent experts quick car cost predict a residual value figure of 40.9% after 48 months of ownership, raking up 20,000 miles a year. That equates to a cost per mile figure of 68.3 pence and is fractionally better than a competing Ford Ranger. Like all pickups, this one can be a surprisingly cost-effective choice. When it comes to benefit-in-kind tax, you can pay a fixed fee every year for a commercial vehicle, rather than one based around CO2 output and list price. As for peace of mind, well, because this is a Volkswagen commercial vehicle, you get a much greater level of cover than with a Volkswagen car or an equivalent Ford Ranger, come to that. This pickup comes with the brand's 5+ Promise standard warranty and service plan, which includes 5 services comprising 3 oil change services, 2 oil change and inspection services, plus 3 MOTs. Plus, there's a 5-year warranty extended from the standard 3 years and valid for up to 124,000 miles, with cover across the UK and Europe, complemented by 5 years roadside assistance. The paintwork warranty is 5 years long too, and the body's warranted against corrosion for 12 years. We expected this second-generation Amarok to be smarter, better connected and classier inside, and it is. We were more surprised by just how much it's improved in terms of practicality, towing ability and off-road prowess. As before, you do have some niggling worries in the plush car-like cabin as to whether this vehicle is really going to prove as tough and durable as its Asian rivals in the long term. But these are concerns your Volkswagen Van Centre will be quick to play down, pointing to this Amarok's development in the Australian outback and its predecessor's tough durability in the Patagonian wilderness. But is it as different from its Ford Ranger development stablemate as likely customers will want it to be? Well, just about. The styling and cabin design is clearly derived from a Ranger, but is Volkswagen enough to pass muster as a separate product? The same is true of the slightly more comfort-orientated ride and handling balance, though we're not really convinced that it's much of an improvement over the previous generation model. You get a much better warranty and aftercare package with an Amarok than you do with a Ranger 2, and this Volkswagen will probably command slightly higher residuals. Despite all of that, this Amarok isn't going to threaten the European sales dominance of the Ranger or globally of the other key segment player, Toyota's Hilux. It won't be produced in numbers large enough for that, or with a range of body styles wide enough. But it'll be a profitable enough player for the Wolfsburg maker, which will be reassuring for the brand in a segment where so many previous rival brands don't any longer think there's money to be made. The Amarok also takes the mantle of the old Mercedes X-Class as a slightly more premium kind of pickup, should you be wanting that. The pickup of the distant future probably won't look much like this, but for the present, this Volkswagen, thanks to quite a lot of help from Ford, represents a very competitive mark of where this segment stands.